towards hybrid research scenarios. The main goal is exploring innovative methodologies and frameworks to facilitate profound research within the arts, emphasizing the inherent values at the intersections of science, technology, arts, and society. The second, scrutinizing past, present, and emerging projects and their impact on shaping the field. We have three presenters. The first one is Joel Ong. The title of the presentation is Untitled Interspecies Umwelten. That's German, right? Yeah. Lua Coderch and Marta Royo, the local contribution, with a presentation titled Gleaning the Art and Science Collaboration Field, a Data Ecology Prototype. And the last one would be Derek Curry and Jennifer Gradecki, right? From algorithms to allegories, leveraging scientific and artistic epistemologies to combat digital disinformation. We had originally a 4 talk that was canceled yesterday, unfortunately, by Lucia Sommerer from Germany. And this was very interesting addition to the panel. So I will address a couple of things about that presentation that is missing. So I know we're running a little bit late, so we will try to save some time here. I will try to be invisible. Just a couple of things about these 3 presentations. I organized like the first 2 as the ones that are related to the life sciences and experiments with the life sciences, let's say, and trying to pose new questions to that domain. I think we will see how these 2 presentations engage in very different and creative and critical ways to the conception of life. And it's not the artist looking at the landscape like in the 19th century. It's revealing the microscopic world, right? I think in both cases. And the second is related to the stage and the value of staging things. In this case, to address critically the disinformation pandemic, right, as being part of your task. And originally, it was a tandem with Lucia Sommerer, who also worked staging cases of white-collar crime using theatrical techniques. So that is, you know, critical approach to staging. So let's start with the first speaker, Joel Ong from York University. Dr. Joel Ong is a media artist whose work connects scientific and artistic approaches to the environment. His recent works explore the visibility and audibility of ambient phenomena with a particular focus on the wind and atmospheric macrobiome, right? Joel holds a PhD from Dex Arts at University of Washington, a fantastic place, and a master's in biological arts from Symbiotica at the University of Western Australia in Perth, right? He was recipient of the Petro-Canada Young Innovators Award in 2020 and is associate professor in computational arts at York University in Canada and the Helen Carswell Chair for Community Engaged Research in the Arts. Joel, it's your time.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me, and thank you, Andrés, for your introduction. Thank you for all the amazing hospitality that you guys have shown, and Barcelona in general is really a very beautiful place. And I was just mentioning to some new friends last night that I don't come here enough, and it's really nice to know that there are friends in these places that you don't usually frequent. So I'll get started. This is my project, ironically entitled Untitled, Interspecies Umwelten, and I'm just going to make sure that this moves. And moves, and good. Okay, so, okay, I think that's great. So as mentioned by Andrés, I did my master's at Symbiotica in Perth after a degree in ecology. So I do come to this project from the sciences in my doctoral studies at DX Arts. I focus very much on visualization and sonification technologies or methodologies, focusing on global migration data. that was closely connected to advocacy movements for undocumented migrant populations in the Pacific Northwest. And this was around the 2015 to 2017 period where those issues were really front and center in the Pacific Northwest, which was actually a holding center, holding detention center for a lot of the undocumented migrants that came in from the Middle East. Right now, through my role as the Carswell Chair in Community Engaged Arts Practices at York, I continue this emphasis on supporting underserved groups, especially racialized youth and youth on the verges of being displaced in the fringes of Toronto. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I do think that some of the experiences that I bring to this project are really built from some of the social partnerships that have been very central to my work. So, you know, in thinking about the artistic or the scientific works as a catalyst for multidisciplinary collaborations or within institutions or communities of amateur artists, and we mentioned community scientists this morning as well. These are perhaps interesting case studies that we could think about. This project began in 2021, actually, when I was kind of collaborating with this bioartist, Roland van Dierondijk, Donk, and we were trying to find a way to commemorate the death of scientist Dr. Simon Park, who is really famous for capturing these long exposures of microorganisms under the microscope and seeing trails of liveliness in them, which is really what he called, I think, chronomicroscopy. Is a really interesting practice. So at a fundamental level, this project is a series of experiments to not only visualize, but to connect the umvelts of microbe and human. As Jacob van Ootskool articulated early in biosemiotics history, the umvelt refers to the bubble or seat of perception that encloses an individual's experience of the world within this subjective lexicon of science and signification. And while we may never fully understand what it means to live as a microbe, Ootskool's theories propose that we can connect somewhat efficiently through the science and inferences of what these signs might mean.
Not working?
Maybe let's go backwards and see. Oh, right, yeah, okay. Sorry, I was maybe putting it the wrong way.
Is this the
That's right. Slide? Yes. So first, what is the euglena? Our protagonist for the story is the Euglena gracilis, pictured here at 400 times magnification under an inverted microscope. It typically lives, as you can see, within a pond, a real nutrient-rich media for it, forming the green algae scum as we see on the surface, excuse me. So it's very rarely seen as an individual. It usually is in very large communities and rapidly grow to human scale. As you can see, every one of the Euglena gracilis moves really intricately, and this translates to it exhibiting rapid responses to stimulus that are repeatable and predictable at a time scale that is actually available to us. So the euglena, for obvious reason, is a very well-studied organism, and we know that it is phototaxic, so it moves towards light, because it also photosynthesizes, as well as chasing down prey somewhat dramatically, like amoeba, that it consumes as well through phagocytosis, almost like an animal. So it's in this really murky distinctions between plant and animal. It also exhibits extensive contortions in its body, as you will see from this slide, and others as well, that are kind of methods for self-preservation. So it moves in certain ways just to make sure it gets more space or to get out of constrained situations. But it could also be framed as performative or expressive gestures, depending on how you look at it. So as a species, our relationship to the euglena is really interesting. It's been used as a bioindicator in ponds for pollutants, such as an agent in proposals also for carbon fixation, but it's also been bioengineered quite extensively for food products, powdered supplements, where it's been, parts of it have been extracted, cosmetics and biofuels. And as more and more of such genetically modified native species of algae are produced, such biomedia usually participates without consent in our interventions into their metabolic lives, and where we amplify traits that are useful for us as opposed to ones that showcase their unique agencies and evolutionary adaptations. So even Kurtzky in his seminal multi-species salon reminds us that the bodies of organisms enlisted within such dreams of biocapitalism often end up as emergent creatures with low environmental fitness and viability, and they are really in need of new forms of care and sustenance. Such issues surrounding lab-made neolife have been discussed quite extensively also in the last 2 decades through artists like the Tissue Culture and Art Project, Critical Art Ensemble, Eduardo Cax, and even our keynote speaker, Chris Salter, in his book Alien Agencies, who talks about a project he initiated at Symbiotica locating performativity within lab-grown muscle tissue. So, the Euglena is also utilized in experiments that invoke its agency in biogames. This is a new frontier of coalescing biological and computational design, something my students are really excited about. And you've probably seen this quite a lot more with Slime Mole, but here is an experiment that was led by Roland at the VAG Future Lab in Amsterdam, where the Euglena was casted as a protagonist in a game that would follow it around as it moved through corners and triggered small light sources. So at a different scale, I think prioritizing the agency or selfhood of an ecosystem or an organism is really part of a global movement now to recognize the critical importance of environmental bodies like rivers, streams, etc., to the ecosystem and the mutual sustenance of biotic and abiotic communities around it. Major headlines such as the attribution of environmental personhood, such as in New Zealand's Wagunyu River in 2017, the Magpie River in Quebec in 2021, and ongoing legal advocacy in the Mekong region in Asia. Here's a dam that was erected in the Mekong River. Grant legal rights to environmental bodies, which provides them the autonomy of protecting themselves against harm, and to bring perpetrators of like pollution or sewage disposal, land use changes, fish and biodiversity loss to charge. So it's interesting, I think it forms an aspect of what eco-poet Lynn Keller calls the self-conscious Anthropocene, where she invites a focus not on the geological or the technological epoch of environmental intervention, what we commonly know as the Anthropocene, but on the moment of recognition of human responsibility. Describing a radical shift in environmental literature, from passive witness to active companion, writing about nature to writing with nature, she asked, what are novel modes of articulation that are important or appropriate to these complex forms of mediation? And at the most basic level, how do environments speak? What do they say? And who can adequately translate for them? So in this sense, my project's interests are not in the valorization of a non-human voice, not just a simple attribution of a voice to the Euglena, for instance, but instead on the prioritization of the sensory mediations and attunements that one would need to have such minute articulations noticeable. So in April this year, also a group of scholars led by a colleague at York, Christine Andrews, unveiled the New York Declaration on Animal Consciousness, which is an ongoing petition that affirms that we can no longer assume that these creatures are insentient or incapable of feeling. They provide empirical evidence for a lot of conscious behaviors and hope to expand the list of animals within welfare regulations from well-studied species like birds or other mammals to include invertebrates like cephalopods, crustaceans, or even microscopic forms of life. But it's not simply about attributing human emotion or conduct to things in nature, but also, the sense of mirrored or reciprocal alterity, strangeness, as was mentioned, unfamiliarity. As I observe it, how is it observing me? So a larger notion of this project also at this point, try to rush that through a little, is to incorporate the environmental histories that are able to be articulated through these earth bodies. And the notion of designing future histories. This is something that I'm working on right now in this iteration of the project. An example of the hunger stones that have been inscribed, phrases that date from 15th to 19th century that have markings of where tidal lines are during drought conditions. And also having words and phrases that were written there, long ago to warn oceanic communities in the future about droughts in Europe. So one of the articulations on this in indigenous language was, when this stone goes under, life will become more colorful again. So my process, of kind of developing really goes through a relationship of care. So if you want to start a relationship with something, you obviously need to know what it is and what it does, and how you respond to it. And so a lot of extensive journaling, but also thinking about notions of care from multiple perspectives, thinking about care for the organism, care for the machine, but also care for myself as an artist, which a lot of artists kind of neglect. And so, thinking about ancient Chinese philosophies as well, and some of that medicine there. So to house the euglena safely within the performative space, I designed a new microfluidics chamber, along with help from the microfabrication facility, and a microfluidics lab at York. Focusing on increasing the mobility of it and giving it some performance stages that it can opt in and opt out of. So there are various levels of success, and this was some of the tests that were done initially. And as you can see, we actually had a proliferation, which became a problem during the exhibition itself, where we had to flush out the euglena because they were clogging up a little bit, and saturated. Yeah. So they were growing a little bit too well. It's a bit too hospitable. These were some of the earlier experiments as well, and I do have maybe 3 slides left, and that's pretty much it. Where this was a visualization that was triggering personal poems or artifacts in my memory, as well as another where the euglena is in collaboration with a fine-tuned GPT-2 chatbot. During the pandemic, this became a conversationalist in a Zoom presentation or intervention presented at the Politics of Machine conference in 2021. Yeah. So this is the installation view at OCAD in Toronto in the on-site gallery. It was part of a massive show called More Than Human, curated by Jane Tingley. And it featured the euglena in a live dish culture, and there was a very rudimentary computer vision algorithm that was looking and seeing what it was doing, how it was feeling, and tracking to see what its contortions of its individual bodies were doing. And this is an example of another iteration of it. When I was focusing more on using LLMs, I guess, to generate these conversations. And here the individual euglena are sensed, and a emotional level or emotional valence is inferred from how circular their bodies are. When they are round, it means that they're in a constrained or tight space and they're kind of moving around aimlessly. And when they're stretched out, they're a little bit happier. Yeah. Last 2 slides, yeah. So right now my team's working on these computational abstractions or animation of movement-based articulations, building on some prior work in motion capture to archive dance movements in marginalized communities around Toronto. So this may include alternative forms of non-alphabetical typography, like these visual character formations, well known in dance circles, or maybe even in non-alphabetical languages, like my mother tongue of Mandarin, for instance, that incorporate historical narratives in their shape and spatial composition. This is definitely something more intricately connected to improvisation and nonverbal text and instructions. I want to just say one thing also about death in kind of dealing with living organisms. Something that was impressed on me in my time at Symbiotica also was like, what's the death cycle of the biomedia that we interact or so-called collaborate with, right? And so I've had pets before and always had this notion of an individualized relationship, one-to-one. But when you buy a euglena from a scientific source, this is Carolina Biological, they also ship a slide that has these fixed cells in them. And when you look through them, it's basically a graveyard because there are all these lysed euglena and all their guts are spilling out. And it's very confronting. And there's a period where you spend guilt-stricken about the things that you're doing. But I've managed to come to terms with that through a quote from Donna Haraway, her ideas about death and returning to a deeper level of symbiosis when she says, "I am vastly outnumbered by my tiny companions. Better put, I become an adult human being in company with these tiny messmates. To be one is always to become with many. I love that when I die, all these dangerous symbiotes that will take over, all these benign and dangerous symbiotes will take over and use whatever is left of my body, even if only for a while, since we are necessary to one another in real time." So this has really helped me deal, I guess, with the life and death cycles through this project as well. And I will leave you with a quote from Donella Meadows, the great biophysicist and cybernetician, where she says, "We cannot impose our will on a system. We can only listen to what the system tells us and discover how our properties and our values will work together to bring forth something much better than could ever be produced by our will alone." And I love this part, which is so pertinent. We cannot control systems or figure them out, but we can dance with them. And with that, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Joel. So next presenter is going to be Lua. And any comments or burning questions? We can have time for one now. We will have 30 minutes at the end, but now, if there is something that you cannot control and want to say, is the moment, please. No? Should we move forward? Okay. So next presenters are Lua Coderch. Is an artist, researcher, and professor at BAU, Barcelona College of Arts and Design. She holds a BA in Fine Arts, an MA in Production and Research, and a PhD in Advanced Studies in Artistic Production for the University of Barcelona. She combines storytelling practices and sculptural and objectual practices in video, performance, and installation that she configures as research devices. And together with Marta Royo from the Ocean Sciences Institute, who is a scientific researcher, designer, and digital visual artist, who holds a bachelor's degree in biology and Master's of Science in Advanced Microbiology, and a PhD in environmental microbiology. She has been researcher at the Institute of Ciencias del Mar since 2012, focusing on ecogenomics of bacteria in the polar oceans, which involves the analysis of big data to understand the role of marine bacteria in the underexplored polar regions. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and in 2018, she co-founded Shook Studio with the aim of making scientific knowledge more accessible through art and design. So, gleaning the art and science collaboration field, a data ecology prototype.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us today. We are very grateful to be in such an amazing company. We'll talk today, I don't know, okay, we have our presentation. We'll talk today about an experimental project between BAU, College of Arts and Design, and the Institut de Ciencias del Mar, which explores interdisciplinary collaboration in ways that are mutually enriching, or are hopefully like this, and grounded in hospitality and care. As you will see, this is by no means a finished project, but we are excited to share our progress and next steps. And of course, we are eager to hear your thoughts and insights. Wait. Oh, okay. We started in a very humble way, a mindset that I think we still hold, with just an abstract interest in doing something together. BAU, College of Arts and Design, an academic institution still very young in the research field, and ICM, which, on the contrary, is the 4th largest research institute of the Spanish National Research Council, and the largest dedicated to marine research. Our team has a variable number of members, with a core group of 9 people that remains constant. Among the scientific profiles of that core group, we have 3 microbial ecologists, 2 with bioinformatics and data analysis background, a geologist, a researcher from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center specializing in physical oceanography, and a biologist specialized in innovative formats for communicating scientific practice. And on the other hand, among the arts and humanities profiles, there is an experimental anthropologist and 2 artists, one of whom holds a PhD in sociology. Although the collaboration between ICM and BAU already existed, we had never, as individuals, worked together. As you all know, the common ground between art and science has been around for some time, but art-science collaboration is an endeavor that is both enriching and challenging, and at times it can be very difficult. And this obviously resonates with the presentations by Chris Salter and also the intervention by Veronica Liebel. From the beginning of our collaboration, we identified the need to reflect on our methods of working together, and more broadly, on what makes art and science collaboration succeed or fail. This has been our primary concern, and it has taken shape as an ongoing foundational line of work that has defined our way of collaborating as we identified common interests to work on, ultimately leading to the outline of our first project together. This line of work focuses on improving mediation processes, ensuring that all participants benefit from the collaboration, innovating methodologies, making expectations and biases explicit, and not assuming that we live in the same world or speak the same language. We quickly identified the need to translate terms and build a common glossary, which are ideas that have already appeared in this room. Okay. This has been crucial in defining the dynamics of our sessions, which we carefully prepare and facilitate. So far, we have met in 2 different formats: internal meetings of the core group and seminars, which are more structured gatherings. The seminars are pivotal moments for our collaboration. Here, you can see the types of activities we carry out during these meetings. I want to emphasize the role we assign to reporting in these gatherings, where we always include an external observer who provides us with a graphic and/or written record of what occurred during the working session. Our first seminar was titled Prospectiva, and its explicit objective was to explore future possibilities based on present indicators. Since our collaboration at that time did not yet have a defined goal or program, what we did in this initial meeting was listen to each other and propose dynamics to accelerate the process of getting to know one another. In previous internal meetings, the word rigor had come up several times and had sparked a lot of interest, so this was the first word we incorporated in our glossary. To do this, we conducted an exercise called the glossary pitch, in which 3 researchers from ICM and 3 researchers from BAU prepared a 3-minute pitch of their approach to the concept of rigor. We also presented a first draft of a decalogue titled Habits and Desires for Caring Encounters Between Artists and Scientists, and had 2 presentations by 2 scientists and 2 presentations by artists. On the second half of the meeting, we continued the conversation in an unstructured way. As we can gather from the reports by Jonathan Millán and Ana Lucia Pinto, ideas emerged also around time, hospitality, what it means to enter someone else's home, and arriving as a guest. Now my colleague, Marta Royo, who joined the project at this point, will talk to us about the next word we incorporated into our glossary, and how this word quickly triggered what would become later our first project.
Thank you, Lua. Okay, so the second word in our glossary was metaphor. And Lua was talking about rigor, which is a word that maybe can be naturally connected and very quickly related to scientific practice, even though the arts are extremely rigorous as well. Whereas for this second meeting, we focused on metaphor, that is a word that can easily be associated to the arts. But science is so complex and talks about such abstract concepts that metaphor is actually a very useful resource. So this time, instead of working from the big word of metaphor, we focused on a very specific word that came out very intuitively in an internal meeting, and that was gleaning. To put everybody on the same page, gleaning is when you go through somebody else's field once it has already been harvested and pick up what's left behind to give it a new life through another perspective. So we found that this word could not be associated to science or the arts, so it was the perfect ground to start building. So we started by watching Agnes Barda documentary called The Gleaners and I, followed by a very open discussion that was very lively and turned out to be actually very productive. These are some of the words that came out of this discussion. We talked about value, perspective, what could be considered a residue from one side or the other, also about biases that Lua mentioned before, and of course that this process is communal. It involves hospitality, and that really fitted very well with our purpose. So after this discussion, what we did was to, going back to the previous slide, work at the Institute of Marine Sciences and detect those materials that could be subject for artistic practice as a means of gleaning. In this discussion, we found that gleaning talks about a process rather than a specific content, and it's a process that did not interrupt at all the activity that we carry out at the ICM. So it was very natural and it came out very organically. What we did was find all the samples that as scientists we use for knowledge production that are left behind after publication. So it involves millions and millions of euros from public funding to go to the ocean, retrieve samples, storing them in our freezers, work on them, and so on. So this was the foundation of our prototype on gleaning this art and science collaboration. What was followed, we constructed these cartographies of specific gleaning fields that we found at the Institute of Marine Sciences. There was this field of data, a field of audiovisual registers, and a field of material samples that could be water, rocks, sediments, and this kind of stuff. So we opened up the third seminar at Barcelona's Center for Contemporary Culture, CCCB, this past summer, and we invited different artists to sit around the fields that they felt most connected to, so that they could just get inspired and see if they could fit and had an interest for developing this collaboration. And this is, these are some of the pictures of the session. It was also super dynamic and the first meeting point for artists and scientists, I would say. So this is the point where we are at. We are actually applying for funding because this has been born out of a common interest.
Yes.
So at the moment, we are already submitted our first project proposal to keep working on this with good conditions. And our main purpose is to define and build prototypes of this possible collaboration from the perspective of gleaning, and just iterate over these prototypes, find the dynamics that work and those that do not work, by compensating artists and mediators and reporters as they should be compensated, and as was said earlier, have the privilege of work on designing a process rather than going straight to production and doing things, just thinking how we work and what does work with the timings that are needed for this kind of research. And there was a very important point in the project that is to include reporters from different disciplines or points of view. that explain the process through illustration, narrative, fiction, and documentation. And we think that this perspective will be key to develop the outcome of the project. I don't know if you want to add something else.
No, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, here, before we transition to the next one, if there is a comment or question that you would like to pose now, feel free to do it. Still shy, right? So, okay, our next presentation, our last one, is by Derek Curry and Jennifer Gradecki. They are media artists who critique technological solutionism by reverse engineering technologies to reveal underlying assumptions and problems that arise through implementation. They use methods from media theory and science and technology studies as a means for critical engagement. They are associate professors at the Art and Design Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. They hold a MFA from UCLA and PhDs from SUNY Buffalo in the media study, in media studies in the case of Curry, right? And visual studies for Gradecki, Jennifer. They have exhibited at venues including Ars Electronica, Science Gallery, Art Santa Monica here, and they just published in our local journal, Art Notes, in the last special issue on media artivism. And this connects with the presentation that they will share today. And the title is From Algorithms and Allegories. So please.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. It's really an honor to be here, and it's already really inspiring, so we're excited to continue the conversation. So today we're going to discuss Epic Sock Puppet Theater, an artistic research project and interactive installation that uses a combination of analytic methods, social science research, and artistic practices to help viewers critically reflect on the tactics used by imposter social media accounts to polarize and disinform the public. We'll focus on how we navigated different epistemologies and methodologies during the process of artistic research. Let's see. Other way? Oh, okay. Oh, that's quite confusing. So this is I can do it if you want.
So Epic Sock Puppet Theater is an interactive traveling theater with animatronic puppets that perform real disinformation posts made by online sock puppets. Participants can select content compiled from various disinformation campaign data sets, and the puppets will speak the words, and any images or video content that was included with the original post will be displayed on the screen behind the puppets. The aesthetic for the puppets was intended to reinforce some of the conceptual aspects of the project. For example, some of the puppet circuitry was left exposed, partly as a distancing technique, which we'll discuss later, and partly to emphasize the role of technology in the socio-technical system that makes online sock puppet disinformation campaigns possible.
The definition of disinformation that we've been working from is adversarial campaigns that weaponize rhetorical strategies and forms of knowing, including not only falsehoods, but also truths, half-truths, and value-laden judgments to exploit and amplify identity-driven controversies.
Wow.
And when you see the content or interact with the project, we think you'll understand why this is the definition that we have found to be the most effective at encompassing all the different dimensions of disinformation.
So organized sock puppet disinformation campaigns begin with what could be described as tactical ethnography, performed by operatives working for governmental or private organizations like the CIA or Cambridge Analytica, or semi-governmental organizations like the Russian Internet Research Agency. These operatives use sock puppet accounts to surveil and infiltrate targeted groups, and once they've gained the trust of a group, the accounts can then be used to spread disinformation. If you're interested in an example of a typical day for a sock puppet operative, a Russian Internet Research Agency employee described how she is giving a daily quota of 5 political posts, 10 non-political posts, and had to make 150 to 200 comments on postings from other Russian sock puppets. For this, she was reportedly paid 41,000 rubles, which is roughly equivalent to 394 euros a month in cash.
Ooh.
The disinformation that's performed by our animatronics comes from data sets released by researchers, government agencies, and journalists. We've also been compiling some data sets ourselves. The largest data set that we've used is from the Russian Internet Research Agency campaign, which was released as part of the Mueller investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. The data set is predominantly focused on polarizing US citizens, but it also includes disinformation targeted at EU countries, Brexit, Australia, Syria, and the Ukraine. We're continuing to build our database and have added corporate sock puppet campaigns focused on climate change, disinformation campaigns from China, as well as the United States military or Central Command. And if anyone knows of any sock puppet disinformation campaigns, please let us know so we can include it in the project. Disinformation campaigns often target specific groups. The goal of these campaigns has been to polarize and divide the public on various topics. Sock puppets pose as members of a targeted, I thought I could get the video to play that way. Sock puppets pose as members of a targeted group, assimilating to the group in terms of the typical topics, positions, and language used by that group. And then they post content to try to manipulate members of that group. Some of the posts organize protests and counter-protests without people realizing who was behind them, and you can see an example of this in the top left of the slide. The socio-technical system that enables the spread of sock puppet disinformation includes online platforms and networks of people coalescing around various affinities. Thank you. One aspect of this system is a fragmented media landscape where users can choose sources that conform to their beliefs, so they can easily become isolated from different points of view. This is compounded by content recommendation algorithms that promote content that gets engagement, tailored to keep users on platforms. And this causes the spread of content that is sensational or causes emotional reactions, from feelings of pride to hate to outrage.
So the project combined analytical methods, social science research, and artistic practices. We drew upon our interdisciplinary backgrounds as well as research from qualitative and quantitative sciences and the arts. The theoretical basis for the project was inoculation theory from social psychology. This theory holds that exposing people to weaker forms of persuasion can help build resistance to persuasion attempts in the future. Research in the area found that the revelation of a sock puppet account helped members of a targeted group identify other sock puppets based on the similarity of their posts. For example, Kevin Winstead found that when an account that was popular on Black Twitter, which is a community of Black Americans on the platform, was revealed to be a sock puppet controlled by the Russian Internet Research Agency, members of Black Twitter were able to accurately identify other sock puppets because they were familiar with the language and type of content from the exposed account. When the first annotated data sets of Russian disinformation were released, there were dozens of research papers analyzing aspects of the data set that could be quantified. There were papers that analyzed post frequency and the times of day disinformation posts were made, papers that mapped the connections between the platforms and accounts, and there were papers on topic modeling, such as quantifying how many posts were made within a category or on a specific topic, and papers that conducted computational linguistic analyses on the words used to target different groups on the right and left.
What was absent for most of these papers was the actual content that was used to polarize and spread disinformation. But these data sets often contained metadata that could be used to locate the posts using tools like the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine to reconstruct the content. We also performed our own data analysis to help us determine which accounts and posts to include in the project, and we were specifically looking for exemplary content that had received a lot of engagement or had made a big impact. Our main challenge was how to allow viewers to maintain critical distancing while viewing intentionally inflammatory sock puppet content. And for this, we drew from Bertolt Brecht's Epic Theater, which is the namesake for the project. Epic Theater emphasizes audience participation and distancing techniques for the presentation of emotional and political content.
Wow. Among the distancing techniques we used is breaking the fourth wall by making participants part of the performance. Viewers needed to interact with the puppets through an arcade-like interface in order for them to perform. When the puppets speak, they're directly addressing the viewers, which prevents the viewer from being a passive spectator, and if no one interacts with the puppets, the show's over, nothing happens. The online disinformation also takes on a different meaning in a public space. Participants cannot share or comment on the sock puppet content, but they can engage in face-to-face discussions about what they experienced with other viewers in the space. Humor was one of the most important distancing techniques in epic sock puppet theater. Henri Bergson argued that laughter is an appeal to intelligence and is incompatible with emotions. He said laughter can disarm people and allow them to laugh at their own faults. This is important for the project because participants may agree with some of the disinformation content that's being performed. What participants found humorous in the project is the incongruity between the puppets' ridiculous appearance and silly voices and the very serious content they're presenting. This allows them to not take the content seriously and reflect critically on it. During user testing, participants would laugh out loud when they would first hear the puppet speak. Some of the participants initially felt bad about laughing because the content was so egregious, but this immediately led them to reflect on how they would have reacted to the same content if they had experienced it online and didn't know that it was part of an organized disinformation campaign.
We did extensive online user testing with an international group to help us determine which data types to include in the project's interface, which voices to use for the animatronic puppets, and how we should deal with sensitive and offensive content. This feedback helped us to learn that the interface should feature a short description of each post, the number of followers or impressions that post had, whether the content was sensitive or not, and the targeted group. We learned that our AI-generated voices needed to be slowed down slightly to be accessible to non-native English speakers, and we did that for all voices. And we found that the less performative and more naturalistic sounding human voices did not create enough distancing from the content. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to show our animatronic puppets performing some disinformation posts, and hopefully we'll be able to get this video to play. It's an excerpt from the project's promotional video.
Scientists can't even predict tomorrow's weather, and you think they know what the climate will be in 100 years. Hashtag I'm a climate change denier.
Climate change denial has nothing to do with science or economics. It's about profit for polluters.
Somehow the new Ukrainian government has fallen in love with burning alive everyone who denies it.
If you point a gun at a cop and get shot, you are not a victim.
Pigs will be pigs. Hashtag pigs with badges.
The president of Russia signed a decree against anonymity on the internet. There can be only one troll in the country.
Struggles are better than shackles. Hashtag Brexit, hashtag believe.
USA and Saudi dictatorship founded Al-Qaeda against USSR, and Al-Qaeda turned into ISIS.
Black churches taught us to forgive white people, but pastors were wrong. White people cannot be forgiven.
You're racist if you deny you're racist.
I will carry the red flag stained with the blood of our forefathers and unswervingly follow the path of the Chinese Communist Party.
Looks like we were manipulated by the alt-right Twitter bot accounts.
The alt-left is literally ISIS.
So if you're interested in learning more about the project, you can check out the project's website, which has a promotional video, that was an excerpt from it, that explains more about the project. And we're also developing an online version of the puppet theater that will eventually live at this web address also. We open sourced the servo easing library that was developed for the puppet movements, and it can be downloaded from GitHub or installed directly through the library manager in Arduino. And we discussed the research process in depth in our case study published in the January 2024 issue of Art Notes. Thank you.
Okay, now there's time for discussion. Anna, how long do we have now? 20 minutes? 15? Half an hour? Okay, so let's proceed. Any questions or comments to the first speakers or the last one? I do have some, but I don't want to. Okay, please.
I won't. Okay, I'll do without that. Yeah, I want to thank.
That works.
Mr. Moist, welcome. You know him?
Test, test. Is it on? Yeah, okay. Excellent presentations. Yeah, I had a really nice complimentary set of commentaries. The comedy comments really helped me kind of understand my life, so I really appreciated that. Explain to me what's going on inside me. I really like this ecology project, how you're combining, how you're working through, again, something that I've really struggled with, how to sort of be working in the sciences and working in the arts and finding that bridge, you know, and all these conversations and all these things, you know, sort of that you have to go through. Again, yeah, really helps me kind of think that through. My question is a little bit more boring, a little bit more technical. For Joel, I wanted to ask you, I'm always curious about this, when you have these data interfaces, you know, and you want to start to, you know, you have biological organisms, you have some laboratory piece or performative piece, and you have data, right? And I want you to talk a little bit about that interface and how you thought that interface and how you're abstracting the data and where, like, what are the data points? This to me is always like a big question. We use data, blah, 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 in this musical piece, and I'm always like how does the climate translate to, and you had a couple of really nice ones where you had, you know, your organisms working, and then you were using GPT. And I'm really curious about what that mapping was, you know, between the words generation there, and then the behavioral data, right? Whatever is abstracted from that data, we're turning that behavior into data. And then there was a second one on top of that, but you can, you know, whatever you want to address within that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. That's actually a really big question, and I want to say the data points that I were using, I was really focused on simplicity at that point because it's not a data visualization piece, although it's being contextualized within that sphere, in the sense that it's not so much about trying to provide information about what you're seeing, than it is more about trying to adopt a different perspective. So, you know, in the sense that like environmental monitoring today just kind of says, well, the more sensors we had, the more we will know about an environment. But then if you change the paradigm to think about what are alternative modes of seeking information rather than just data-centric practices, but, you know, more conversational or narrative approaches to understand histories that are embedded within Earth bodies and environments, that's a totally different kind of understanding of the subject matter. So I think for me in particular, it was almost problematic in that sense to present the living organism side by side with the data visualization of it. You know, it became a data body almost instantly. Everyone was drawn to the projection of it and not really to the organism itself. But there was a secondary part of it where, you know, as the artist or as the caregiver or the maintenance staff of this project, you know, as I was, you know, involved in the vital maintenance and care of it, I would come in on a daily basis, actually, to ensure that the Euglena were doing well. And, you know, these were the times where I would interface with the public who were already there, and they were wondering, oh, what are you actually doing? You know, and then I would show them, no, this is the habitat they're in, and this is the amount of work that needs to go on to have that final product over there. So, you know, there is a relationship of making visible some of the processes involved there, which, you know, I'm hoping to be a bit more articulate about in future iterations of this piece. Sometimes when you have a show that's like away from where you are, it's difficult to have that kind of assiduous connection. But in showing some of those pictures about the journal entries and that kind of day-to-day activities as well, I'm hoping that that process becomes clearer.
Thank you. Any more interventions, questions? Chris, please. Is there a mic around, or maybe I can help with the mics. So, yeah. Please.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks everybody for the presentations. This is more to Lua and Marta, and also to Joel, because you're working with scientists. It's very simple. What do the scientists these mainly natural scientists working in microfluidics, or what do these scientists expect in these collaborations? What do they want out of them? I know what the artists want, but I want to know what the scientists want.
I think that there aren't many expectations from the scientists' side. I think that we're just open to see what perspectives and what other ways of understanding can be brought onto the table. And it's kind of a way of redirecting our passion that makes us work in science through other languages and with other collaborators.
Also, I think when the concept of gleaning appeared and we put it on the table, suddenly many things happened also between that small scientific community that we're working with. And it started a conversation about what gleaning practices were already happening in ICM, for instance, and why not more, no? So I think that that weird conversation between artists and scientists kind of moves many, many things. So this is, for us, the first thing we gain, no? The first.
The term that many people know here, that the gleaning became the boundary object to, let's say, connect these disparate communities together, or to enable them to do work together. Because otherwise, that's where most projects fail. There's no boundary object, so people just think the other knows what the other one's talking about. But
And I think Marta said something very important before, that the power of this concept has something to do with the fact that it's not a concept that comes from the art world, neither from the scientific world. So that gave us a new field to explore. And we've been talking about metaphors and allegories, this idea of a metaphor that is moving things, from one place to the other. I think that this really worked for us.
I think it's important to mention as well that I think that there's a specific profile in scientists that can participate in this kind of collaborations from the right perspective. Because I was thinking, I know a lot of scientists that may look at this opportunity as a way of communicating their science. And that's not at all what it's about. And I think that's one of the key points in the collaboration as well, to find, as well as it's super important to find the right artist, the right mediator. I think it's important to find the scientist with the right mindset.
Yeah, and I would add to that point as well, that knowing your audience is really key to starting these conversations, and to think about like the intersection of worlds as well, to be able to almost find out what the objectives are of the other world within that worldview itself. How are you going to align your objectives with theirs? And my example, specifically with the microfluidics scientists, and of course these are isolated and may not be true for every interaction, is that at the higher level, at the lab directors level, it's very hard to get them to think about metaphors in the way that we do, and to sit them down for hours on end discussing such things. So it's really about prioritizing what your ask is, and so if we are on a level playing field, or we are in understanding that I guess all of science and the humanities are about understanding more, creating new knowledges, and potentially for these knowledges to be translated into further experimental products, or to nourish further generations of scientists, as a lofty ambition. Then pitching something like that to the lab directors gets their seal of approval, and then you kind of get access to the lab. And usually when you go into the lab where there are lab technicians or there are students working on research projects that are multi-year, that's where these conversations become most fruitful. And that's where the kind of practice-led research of the artist really has no distinction between the practice-led research and the sciences. But so in my example for microfluidics, for instance, I did know that at that time there was no real design of a chamber that would immobilize euglena or algae at that particular rate and to study them individually. And so when I pitched it to them, they said, well, this is potentially something that other scientists working in the microbiology could use. And so we started working there, and he gave me access to his lab, full run of it, and we even had a postdoc who was working together as well, which really helped to smoothen a lot of the processes.
And what happened?
Thanks.
We're still in the process of it, and that's something that we are actively working on. And I do believe that it will come up in an article as well as further funding. I think Canada is quite unique in the sense that there are these new frontier researchers that give quite significant funding to projects like this that are very speculatively bridging these very different domains.
Thank you. I would like to ask one question to Derek and Jennifer. Should I? So listen, I'm really impressed by the depth of the research that you have conducted, the tools that you are using, kind of the original perspective that you have towards this information that is being, visualizations, mathematical models, in some cases, connected to biological behaviors like viruses, things like that. But this idea to take it to the stage and to intervene with sense of humor, where that decision came from?
You want to start? You want me to start?
Go ahead.
I mean, we're coming out of tactical media, and I think that that's an important part of our trajectory. So we want to, find ways to draw people in to the work, and this, of course, we're also referencing, Brechtian theater, but in a sense of it being a tactic for us to connect with people. And interestingly, when we started this project, it was part of the Media Futures transnational residency, and so there was already years of people doing this research, bringing together these ideas. And I think that part of that process was already started for us. So when we applied, it was the third round, and the notion of inoculation, I think that's where we got it from, was from some of the articles that had been coming out from that grant. And one of the things that we said when we applied, like our main criticism of the Media Futures experience, was that we really would have liked to have more time. That was a 6-month process, and so that really resonated with what you were saying earlier with the keynote presentation. So yeah, a lot of the research happened prior to even applying for the grant. We'd actually been working on this topic for years ourselves, starting in the pandemic, actually in 2020, and looking into misinformation and the type of socio-technical system that actually produces and perpetuates misinformation is really, it's the same exact platform and series of networks, influencers, content recommendation algorithms, this kind of system that perpetuates that problematic spread of harmful information. Yeah, there's so much to say.
Right, I think part of it is the granting structure too, because it's always this sort of like instrumentalized, like goal-oriented thing, and it was hard for us to find a project where we could actually leverage something that was powerful about art and combine it with data analytics or something like that in a way that did something meaningful within an art context. And so, yeah, like Jennifer was saying, the first 2 calls for Media Futures went by, and it was, I think, a little after the second call that the idea actually came to us, like we could use like these old strategies from avant-garde traditions in a way that can actually contribute to helping people deal with disinformation.
Perfect. So I would like to conclude with a couple of remarks. Thank you very much for your answer. It's like, Joel, I think this question about sentience at that microscopic level is really mind-blowing and can be a very interesting point of departure for a big reflection of what, for instance, intelligence is today. Now that we have this these technical abilities that we call intelligence, in machines and devices, in networks, and eventually there is something, already working at that microscopic level that it's, intelligent as well. But it's connected to the idea of connecting with the environment, sentience, how they feel around and how eventually they express something that, it's embedded at the microscopic level of life. I don't know. I think it's a very powerful question that you are posing there. Regarding your presentation, I think like this idea of gleaning, trying to connect with kind of the debris of scientific experiments, the things that are left behind, is really powerful. It's something like bringing circular economy to scientific processes. There is a lot of investment sometimes, and we don't know where the money goes after, right? And I think, that question that you're posing, it's very fruitful, and I hope you can develop this concept to take it, to other fields. I think it's the most important lesson I get. And the last presentation is, in this field, we tend to be very smart, right? And try to be, articulated. And the fact that you have this distance, from the really serious work that you are doing, and the stage that you are using, with the kind of the challenge of the channel of comedy and humor is incredibly powerful. And I would like to see that idea developing in the future. So with this, I also want to say thank you very much to everyone. I think everyone needs a little bit of food at this point. And sorry, I need to announce is the is the Director of Communications of the Open University of Catalonia. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say a few words about the exhibition we are going to open. No? It doesn't work?
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to say a few words about the exhibition we are going to open at 3 o'clock on the dot here at the entrance of this building. Over the last 6 months, within the framework of the program developed by ACTE, Barcelona's Art, Science and Technology Hub, Mark Farid, that is here with us, I thought I can, maybe it's outside. Over the last 6 months, Mark Farid, that is an artist, researcher and lecturer in fine art at the University of the Arts, London, and he is one of the 11 people selected for the START Science, Technology and the Arts residencies. Mark Farid's project, Invisible Voice, explore how external factors, when passed through a filter of technology, can shape our identity and conscience. And it specifically questions whether digital technology can change the current narrative on the climate crisis. Can the dialogue between art, academia, and activism really contribute to changing how we perceive what is being said about this global emergency? What is the truth behind what large corporations are saying about sustainability, for example? And you can see for yourself. Go with the brand of your computer, your drink, or your trousers, an invisible voice sensor will scan it and give you some insight. Invisible data, often hidden data, will be visible. At the works office of the Vice Rector of Alliances, Community and Culture is very pleased and honored to have had Mark Farid here with us, to be able to host the Invisible Voice project here at our university, and to be able to make it available to everyone who comes to visit our campus. The residence highlights that the arts can play to foster dialogue between research, production, transfer, and dissemination, and the university's commitment to cultural action in response to the individual and collective challenges facing our society. On behalf of the Rector and device rector. I invite you to find out what invisible voice is and to interact with it. Remember, at 3 o'clock on the dot at the entrance to this building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. Sí, está bien.